But the interesting thing about real estate or PropTech, property-related technologies or construction tech, is that they're not very friendly to outsiders. So most of the people who come up with great ideas in PropTech come up through a real estate background. So we do have a good chunk of realtors who decided, F this, I can do it better, and started a startup.
All right, welcome back to another episode of The Flip Side with your host, me, Blake Schultz. I've got Andrew Ackerman with me today. So a little intro. He is a strategic advisor / head of Reach Labs for Second Century Ventures, the venture capital arm of the National Association of REALTORs, which I'm very excited to talk about because I'm not aware of that. And you speak at least 4 languages. Is that right?
Well, if you count JavaScript, yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot. That's a mouthful. You've accomplished a lot, and I'm very excited to dive into each one of those. Before we do, because I've got a lot of questions around those, but give me a quick background on how you got started, where you come from, and how you got into the seat you're in today.
Yeah, so my journey only makes sense in retrospect. At the time, there was a lot of zigging and zagging. So, you gave the broad overview. I mean, I just came out of business school, and back then the internet wasn't really a thing. This whole startup stuff, if you said you were an entrepreneur, you were unemployed. So I had 2 choices coming out of business school. Door number 1 was investment banking. Door number 2 was consulting. And I knew I didn't want to do investment banking, so I did consulting for a bit. But then I was on a project which had this kind of internet thing going on. I was like, that's cool. Now I know what I want to do. So I quickly did my first startup. And then, of course, after my first startup, I ended up working at a family office because that made sense, right? Then I went back to a startup, did a second startup, and then before I did a third startup, I ended up getting involved with Dreamit Ventures, which is an accelerator and a VC fund. I ran that for many years before ultimately ending up doing all the 3 or 4 things that I do now.
That's awesome. So I want to dive into a couple of those startups, especially the very first one.
Sure.
And that's going to tie hopefully pretty well into your new book, which is behind you, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, which we're going to talk about.
That's all right.
Yeah. So that first one, because a lot of my audience is more real estate focused, but we do have just young entrepreneurs who are they've either been in a W-2 job and they're tired of that, and they've got maybe some golden handcuffs, but they want to get out and do their own thing, or they're, maybe just out of school and they don't, kind of like myself. I like to joke that I was somewhat unemployable because I just wanted to go do my own thing. Mm-hmm. And so what did that look like for you to go start a business? What was it? What did it take? Was it cash intensive? Did you bootstrap it? Can you paint that picture for me?
Yeah. I'm happy to talk to you also about it from the real estate angle. The interesting thing about real estate or PropTech, property-related technologies or construction tech, is that they're not very friendly to outsiders. So most of the people who come up with great ideas in PropTech come up through a real estate background. So we do have a good chunk of realtors who decided, F this, I can do it better, and started a startup. That's totally cool. But let's roll it back to basics, right? So my first startup, I did a lot of things wrong. The only virtue I can say is I didn't do anything so wrong that it killed the company, right? And I have the 2 co-founders. Hopefully, I know they can say the same thing, but we did a lot wrong. Just didn't know any better, right? So don't beat yourself up over that. The key thing is to really just don't kill the company. Keep moving, iterate, get it right. If there's any one lesson I can give to people, I will say one thing for the people that, you said they're kind of in their cubicle or they're in their office trying to decide if they want to make that jump. There's a lot more information out there about what it takes to build a startup than ever before. The thing that was shockingly rare, and part of why I wrote the book the way I did, was something that gives you a feel for what it's actually like on a gut level, watching your bank account go down every month kind of way until you finally start to sell stuff. But the actual, this is what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. Is it right for you or not? You can't get from dry how-to guides or from blogs or, and anything, TikTok reels, whatever it might be. You're just not getting that any other way. So for those people in particular, I chose to write my book, The Entrepreneur's Odyssey, like a novel about a startup. So you can really get the feel for, in reality what it's like, not like the Steve Jobs biopic that makes it seem all glamorous, and not like the how-to guide, which will give you all the tools, but not the feel for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and that's seems that type of storytelling resonates, I think, with a lot of the entrepreneurial mindset. And that I just finished reading for the 10th or 11th time, Raving Fans. It's written in the same kind of style. I think The Goal is written like that. So there's a couple really good.
You nailed it on the head. The Goal is what inspired this.
Okay, awesome.
I read The Goal in business school. Oh, for the audience who doesn't know what it is, by the way, I found out there's a word for it. It's called a business fable. I didn't know that until my publisher told me, oh, we love business fables. Oh, okay. But The Goal was used very widely as a textbook in business school, when I was coming up. And it was a story about a guy that needed to turn around a printing plant in the Midwest. And as a novel, okay, right? It did not win any prizes for like writing style, but it was a heck of a lot more engaging than any textbook I ever had in business school or undergrad. In fact, I don't remember any of them other than The Goal. So I used to actually describe my book as The Goal, but for startups. But, that was a long time ago. So most people just give me blank stares and I have to tell them what the goal is. So I don't do that anymore. I did have a friend who's in PR. He's like, Andrew, you're doing it all wrong. You have to describe it as lean startup meets The Alchemist. Yeah. So Matt's really good at what he does, because I use that and they're like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Goal is exactly what it was based on. So spot on there. That's
perfect. I look forward to reading it. I don't have my copy yet, but it's coming. I look forward to reading it. So jumping back to that first startup, it sounded like you had two partners on. So was that in the tech space?
Yeah, absolutely was. So it's the old skit, like, and now for something completely different. Yeah, this had nothing to do with real estate. This is before I even touched real estate. It was a company called Bunk One, and let's put our minds back in like the dawn of time. So around like 1999, 2000. What we started offering with these summer camp features, website services for summer camps. Mm-hmm. And most summer camps were like, they got nothing, right? And if anything, they had like 2 or 3 like pages on the web, like a brochure, but just that's it. Mm-hmm. And we took it to the next level. We started offering password protected photo galleries so the parents could see kids at camp. We started doing, we called it a bunk note system. So if you had a kid in camp and you wanted to like send a note from your computer, but you don't want your child anywhere near the computer during the summer, it got sorted and printed out and handed to them automatically. So a whole bunch of stuff like that. It took us a while to figure out how to get that across concisely to a camp director who was like, yeah, I got me a website. We're good. We're like, no, you don't. You don't really. But yeah, that was the first startup.
Yeah. Well, that's funny because saying that now I'm 35, so I remember those days, but maybe to a younger generation, that would be like a foreign language hearing that's just not like now it's a click of a button. But then it
was hard back then.
99, 2000. Yeah, that was cutting edge. I love it.
Well, that's there's a good news and bad news to people thinking about building a startup now. Right. The good news is there's a lot of stuff that I had to go through, and even you had to go through not that long ago. It was really hard, and it's not hard anymore. Like now, you want to put a website up, you don't need a server. I used to have a server. You didn't have to put it on the desk anymore. But we had to go down to a place called Globix, like temperature controlled room. We had to plug our own machines in, run the cables. Right. I still remember when we got our third machine. I was there with the CTO, and he's like, "I really should have labeled the cables. I don't know what I can unplug now. The site will go down." Now you just put up on AWS. Amazon Web Services takes care of it all, no problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of APIs out there, so you don't have to build everything from scratch. You're like, oh, I'll just take that. We'll plug in here, or I'll go on GitHub and I'll get this code. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that stuff's a lot easier, and that's awesome. Like the right hand giveth and the left hand taketh away, because it's easier than it used to be to do a startup. You can get a lot further on a lot less money. Now the VCs expect you to get a little further before they'll give you money.
Yeah. So when the barrier to entry is a little bit lower, right? So you've got a lot of competition on that base level.
And you get a lot of the ambitious, smart, hungry entrepreneurs who just can't, like, I got to get out of the office. Like, I know I can do it better. There are a lot of them that would just end up banging their head against the wall so they couldn't do it. Now it's a lot easier for them to do it. So more competition.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump over to the real estate space. So, venture capital arm of the National Association of Realtors. Tell me what that means, because obviously I know what NAR is, but I did not know they had a VC arm. So tell me.
Sure. No, I can tell it to you the way the party line goes, and I can tell it to you the way, it kind of really happened. Let me guess, you want the second of the two?
Give me the first one first. Just
Sure.
It's the book, I guess.
Yeah. So, the Second Century Ventures was set up, I think, in 2008. This is before I was a part of it, to give NAR like a look kind of into the future of what was going on in real estate technology, so they could, influence it and make sure that the real estate agents always stayed central to the transaction. And that way they keep their members relevant, which is a very nice way of saying Zillow came out of left field and scared a lot of people. And then a lot of people started looking up and say, like, there are no more travel agents left, and God forbid there are no more real estate agents. So that's kind of the, there's greed and there's fear, right? So like, there was a healthy dose of fear that kickstarted it. It was actually a very prescient move. Like, they moved very early. Second Century Ventures was one of the earlier PropTech funds. Made a couple of really great investments early on. It's what's called an evergreen fund, so it recycles the money. So it was able to take that money and just keep investing in more and more great startups.
Okay. And so what's the tie to that, to the Association of Realtors? Do y'all have a strategic partnership with them that realtors work with you, or what's the tie in there?
So the straight line, as opposed to the dotted line, is NAR put the initial money in.
Okay.
Right, so that's the straight line. So, officially NAR is an investor in Second Century Ventures. Kind of the relationships that spring up around it is very deep ties in with NAR. So a lot of the startups will go to the annual convention. They'll go to the mid-year legislative convention. We have really close ties to a lot of the larger realtor associations around the country. We actually, one of the things that I do, you mentioned I head up Reach Labs. I have a parallel program that's part of Second Century, where I actually help these realtor associations find startups on their own to bring the technology to their members as well. So there's a lot of that. We want to help you guys stay in the center of transaction. So we find these startups, but we want to make sure they're actually doing stuff that you need. So a lot of the more tech forward realtors will actually be advisors, early customers of the startups.
And it's interesting, you said, I think you said 2011-ish, Zillow came in and scared a lot of people and scared a lot of associations, and they continue to do so even this year. They're making some noise, and so seeing which I think is healthy for the industry as a whole, because it's helping the association and agents inside it reevaluate, what's important to them and what's not, and let's kind of cut the fat and really talk about the support that agents need across the country, and how we, at the end of the day, can give the most service and best service to our clients, which is really the ultimate.
Absolutely. That's the whole point. Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we're here. Okay, so let's talk about that Second Century Ventures. One, do you personally invest in real estate outside of there, and then inside of that VC, what do y'all do inside of there?
Yeah. So so you said y'all, that means me personally. If you said all y'all, I know that meant everybody.
That's right.
I've included. No, so I personally don't invest in real estate itself. I don't. There's that saying that if you look around the room and you don't know who the dumbest person in the room is, it's you. So when it comes to actually investing in real estate, I know that's not where I don't have any particular edge over anyone else. Where my skills come in is around the startup side and the intersection between what makes a great company and a great investment as a VC, and how to help those companies really develop, grow their sales, grow their partnerships, and connect with the industry. So I stay on the PropTech side of property, not the real estate side of it. Some of the other people in Second Century Ventures or in the Reach programs, which are some of the other programs they run, we'll do a little bit of both. So it's really a personal choice on my hand, just knowing what I'm better at. Now I will invest in startups, both in and out of the program. So in my prior career, so I'm in an interesting position relative to Second Century Ventures. So let me give you a little bit more background. So Second Century Ventures stood up a bunch of programs called Reach, and there are about 8 of them around the world, different geographies. And their mission is to find startups, slightly more mature startups than your typical accelerator, but try to find these startups, help them grow, also help them see realtors as an ally and an asset rather than a barrier to go around. And they will invest directly in the startups. And as those startups continue to grow, Reach and Second Century will continue to grow, invest in their higher and later rounds. Now, what I'm doing for Reach Labs is a non-investment program. And I'm just helping the realtor associations actually bring more and more startups in. So since I'm not running a specific program, I don't have the same problem I had in my prior role, which was, hey, I got these great 10 startups. I love them all equally, but I'm going to invest in that one and not those 6. All right, so I'm kind of air gapped a little bit. So I actually have made an investment in one. I'm about to make an investment in a second Reach company, but separate from Second Century. Just me and a couple of my buddies.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. For Second Century, it sounds like it's been around for a while. How big is it? How vast is that company?
So there's a couple of ways to answer that. One is in the VC world, we talk about assets under management. Mm-hmm. That's actually something they keep a little quiet, but it is one of the top 5 largest VC, maybe 6 largest VC funds that are focused on real estate and related industries like construction as well, or the financial services that touch real estate. Anything where realtors and the real estate community of developers and GCs and all that, anywhere having access to that network would be super valuable for a startup. They are one of the biggest VCs in that space. People-wise, they're probably the biggest because running an accelerator is a pretty hands-on heavy thing to do. Like you can do a regular VC fund with 1 or 2 people, if it's small enough. You can't do an accelerator without 3 or 4 people minimum. And remember, they have 8 of them.
Okay, so I want to talk about So my day job is being a realtor. My background's I've always been an agent, but I've always invested in real estate. Developed, kind of flipped, been on the investing side as well. And so naturally, a good bit of my client base as an agent is that investor pool or people wanting to get into it. Listening to places like Bigger Pockets and a lot of those more known avenues to get into that space. One of the acronyms that's tossed around a lot is OPM, or other people's money. And it's somewhat overused and I think can confuse a lot of newer people in the space of, well, you don't have to have any money to get into investing. And I think that while can be true, can be dangerous as well. I want to talk about the differences of what that OPM or other people's money can be from, and does that venture capital money fall into that category for an individual, or does that come in more so? I know you mentioned Second Century, more mature businesses, but is there a VC world out there that does take interest in that early investor?
Yeah. So let's take them step by step, right? The flip side to OPM is skin in the game. Mm-hmm. Right. So you all heard that. As you can imagine, other investors aren't keen on hearing, hey, Blake, this is an awesome investment. You should invest in it. And then you say, how much money you got in it? I don't really have any money in it.
Right.
Right. So that's not a good look for anybody. So, the percentages may be a little different, like what people expect the lead investor to have, or, the people that are running the fund. It varies quite a bit, but the same principle applies, right? So whatever's kind of normal in the industry, if you're putting a little less than normal, you got some explaining to do. And if you're putting a little more than normal, that's totally fine, right? It's just a heavier thing to do. You'll know better if you're doing a fix and flip and you want to bring on some silent partners. You probably know better than I do how much they expect you to put up, 10%, 20%, I don't know. In, kind of in the VC world, It depends, right? So to lead a round, right? So let me just kind of break that down for you. Let's say you're a startup and you're raising a $2 million seed round. Right? To put that in context, and putting aside like those AI tools where it's like, I need $50 million out of the box just to get started. For a normal startup, they've managed to either self-fund or with a little bit of money from their friends and family, get the product ready to go. Maybe they got a couple of unpaid pilots, maybe even just a little bit of revenue. But, they need to raise the money to like go out there and start really, bringing on paying customers. I raised $2-3 million plus or minus. It's called the seed round.
Yep.
Now to lead a round, the VC fund that comes in probably has to take about half that round. Could you do it with a third of the round? Maybe. But, at some point, they're like, we're leading the round, but we're only putting in 10%. Sure you are. I'm going to set the terms, not you. Right. But to lead the round, you have at least half plus or minus of the round.
Okay.
So that's not what's expected. And within the VC fund, I remember the VC fund has its own investors. There is something called the GP commit, which means like the partners who are running the fund, they have to put in some of their own money. But since we're talking about funds that could be 50 million, 100 million, $1 billion, the GP commit is a much, much smaller percentage of that total than you'd expect it to be, if it was just you and me buying a condo together.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you're gonna give on one side of the coin or the other. It's just which one do you pick?
Yeah, and it's also like, as so many things, it's like, what's the expectation in the industry, right? What's generally considered reasonable and what's considered to be kind of a yellow light.
Yeah. I had a conversation this morning with a buddy as we, one of our side things is launching an equipment rental company right now. And what I don't want to do is bootstrap the start of it, which I've done on a couple other businesses to this point, because that's just what I knew and didn't have the cash. And didn't have the understanding of leverage and going out and borrowing and I don't necessarily want to dive into that too deep, but also don't want to spend 16-hour days just kind of bootstrapping to grow it, where I know it could springboard years ahead with the correct start.
Mm-hmm.
And so not necessarily looking to dive into like VC or seed funding for that, but what's some advice, and maybe it comes in your book once I get it in and read it, but some advice of kind of that middle ground of, we need to have some hire, need to spend some money up front, but also I don't want to take on a huge amount of debt to be a 3-year company month one.
Yeah. So you bring up like a couple of really, really good points here. So like every time I say startup, I'm implicitly saying tech startup, right? The kind of stuff like you go out there, you're doing Facebook, or it's like a business to business, software where you're charging like 50 grand a year or 250 grand a year. Now, this is not to say that like those are all the startups there are. They're actually a very small segment of the startup world. Like anybody that goes out there, quits their day job, and like, I'm a consultant now, right? Anyone that goes out there and like decides, I'm not doing corporate anymore, I'm going to go, fix and flip, right? They're entrepreneurs. They're creating businesses. In fact, their businesses are more normal in a way because, they're established businesses, right? If you go to a bank with a plan for, say, a car wash, right, they're pretty certain that unless you're a total clown, the business plan makes sense. The only thing you don't know in that case is what's the top line, right? But if you have a car that's going to take this much water, this much, soap, and like, whatever, again, these many people, like those are existing business models. Those are all known. Plus, you're going to have physical equipment. So you can actually maybe get a loan against that. And so in the real world, you can bootstrap, you can get loans, right? You can do all these other things. You can do, buyer financing, you're like, hey, I'll sell it to you, but if you pay, earlier, right, or in advance, I give you discounts. That stuff all works in like the real startup or the non-tech startup world. It doesn't work in the tech startup world often because people are building totally new things. Like it's not a car wash. It's, I don't know, it's like a drone wash. We've never done that before, right? Whatever it might be. Or it's like it's like a mobile car wash that comes to your driveway. I don't know. These are all different things with different business models, haven't been built before. And you can't go to a bank and say, hey, will you give me a loan against it? It's like, we have no idea how to underwrite this, right? It's never been done before. So for the tech startup world, you have to go and raise money from angel investors and VCs, not because it's cool or not because it's better, It's because that's the only alternative you have left. Right? Instead of taking a loan out, and you still own 100% of your company, you got to go give away a piece of your soul when you take money from a VC. Right? That's the least worst alternative. Right? It's only slightly better than not having the money and not being able to do it.
Right.
So like, let's not glamorize fundraising, right? So, choosing what the right amount of money and the right type of money is a factor of what kind of business you have, how much risk you want to take, and what your options are.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point, because VC funding in the tech world, you don't have a tangible asset to collateralize or put debt up against. And so what does that underwriting look like, and how to evaluate that risk of that brand new? Yeah.
No, okay, I'm joking a little bit. So we actually do have some, right? So it's become increasingly common that there is hardware or equipment involved in the startup. Right? There are some investors like, no, we only do SaaS, we only do software. But especially in PropTech and construction tech, there's often a hardware component. So let's say you're doing a smart apartment, like you want to sell to like rental properties. Hey, I'm going to give you like smart lights, smart thermostat, smart blinds, all that kind of stuff. Well, you need some equipment, right? I mean, you got to have the sensors, you got to have the motors for the blinds, or you got to have like the the hub that actually transmits that information. There's a little bit of hardware involved, right? Just very common in our space. I have one startup that I'm working on right now. It's a piece of heavy equipment that, instead of drilling into the ground and burying fiber optic cable, it lays naked fiber flat on the ground, covers it with a resin. Pretty cool approach. Faster, cheaper, safer. The machine costs $300,000. Mm-hmm. Right. So, we do some of that. Sometimes it's machinery and stuff that you can't use for anything else, so the bank won't lend against it. So you're back to square one. But there are creative ways to take on a little debt when you're more mature. So the question is, like, in the absence of collateral, how does a VC decide to collateralize or to underwrite, its offer to invest? And it really comes down to understanding, what the problem is. Right? Is this really tackling a painful, widespread problem that no one else is tackling, or no one else has solved yet? Is the solution good? And is this the kind of team that can execute against it? So I'm glossing over a lot of things, but we're taking a bet on the potential of the business rather than the assets of the business and the skills of the people who are actually executing.
Yeah. Well, that was leading into my next question somewhat, is how much is it heavily weighted on the individual, right? And just believing in their ability to execute. Well,
we have a saying in the field, right? Do you bet on the jockey or the horse? And it's just a stupid saying, right? Because I mean, I've never been to a racetrack and seen a horse win without a jockey on it. Right. I've certainly never seen a jockey running all by himself. Yep. So it's got to be both, right? In fact, I often use the analogy of a chain, right? There's a good 8 or 9 or 10 things that have to happen right for a startup to be successful, not including the luck element, just in terms of like the elements of the plan. Mm-hmm. And if any one of those elements, any one link in the chain is broken, startup's broken. Mm-hmm. Right? So they all have to be there. It's not like a rope where a couple of strands fray, the rope still holds. Everything has to be in place.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense. That's incredible. Okay, so I want to dive back into the book. We're coming up against time, but I want to talk about the book a little bit more. It is a new release, and so it looks like you do write a good bit. I've seen you've written columns for a lot of different outlets. Is this your first book?
So technically, it's not. My first book was a humor book written under a pen name, but that was like 25 years ago. And to be honest, there weren't more than 3 or 4 sentences in a row in the entire book. Okay. You would politely call it a bathroom book. When we're off air, I'll tell you more about it if you want. The challenge for this book, you're right, I do write a lot, but most of what I write is for the trade press, the startup press, the real estate press, construction press. So it's usually like, 500, 600, 800 words. And it's my voice, and that seems to work. But for a book that's 200 plus pages long, like that doesn't work. Right? You need to be able to I needed to be able to be comfortable that I could actually write this so that the character sounded differently. I needed to be comfortable that I could write something that was when I do as a novel, it has to be a coherent story from beginning to end. It can't just be, you and me sitting at a conference room and WeWork looking down at a business plan, right?
Yep.
So I had to come up with ways to turn it into a story. So, step by step, I kind of work through that. So, for example, the main character's name is Marcus. Right? He's the entrepreneur. Every time I have Marcus speak, I've got an entrepreneur that I funded a couple of years back. And I just say, okay, his name is Kofi. How would it sound if Kofi were saying it? Right. And it's his voice. Right. In fact, I put an Easter egg in it. Marcus's son in the book is named Kofi as a kind of an homage to him.
Now, does he know that he's modeled after?
Yeah. I wanted to wait to see if he could figure it out on his own.
Okay.
But the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
In fact, it's kind of just to give you an example. The second thing I mentioned, we talk a lot about revenue model. Like, how are you charging for this? Right. Are you charging per widget you sell, or is it, 1 month you can use the software and then next month you got to pay me again, like recurring revenue, or tons of other things. The way I tell that story is actually a conversation between Marcus and his son Kofi on the subway in New York on the way to school. And, Kofi, the son, says like, oh man, if I owned the subway, I'd be rich. And his dad's like, let's turn this into a teachable moment. It's like, well, it's really cool that the same $2.90 that gets you, you and me to 4 stops to your school, we could go all the way to Coney Island if you want to. And his son's like, no way, Dad, that sucks. You should pay for every stop. And that turns into a discussion of how you could charge for things from per use to revenue-based to freemium. Like, can you give 2 free rides a day so people can get to and from school, but then they charge for more, right? Even down to share of savings pricing. So that was the other challenge. That's how I solved it. I just found stories that I could embed the actual lesson part of the startup in.
I love that. So who would you say, did you have a specific avatar that you wrote this book for, trying to pinpoint a certain person in a?
Yeah. So to put it in startup speak, that would be your ideal customer profile, your ICP. So I have a couple of them. Number one is, hey, you're doing a startup right now, stop, buy the book, read it, learn from other people's mistakes before you learn from your mistakes.
Yeah.
All right. That's number one. Slightly related to that is the guy sitting in the office and, he or she's thinking like, I really want to do this startup thing, but I don't know what that's like. So get it now. You'll not only know kind of step by step what you need to do, but also what it feels like and if it's the right thing for you personally to do. So that's, kind of the second one. I also use it as a textbook in my entrepreneurship course. So students studying entrepreneurship, that's kind of another target. And last but not least, right, if your mom was like my mom and like every time she saw, it's like, are you sure you don't want to go to law school? I don't know exactly what you do. Just buy a copy for her and give it to her and say, Mom, this is what I do.
I love that. That's so good. Well, perfect. Well, are you, before we wrap up, are you reading or have you read any major books that just really stuck with you in the business world that you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. So I'm going to give a shout out, but I'm also going to give a qualification. Like, I hate business books. I really do. And the problem is they're just, even the ones that are good content are just horribly written. Like, my eyes glaze over. I can read them for like 10 pages at a time and fall asleep. Because they all seem to be written by the same guy in the Midwest with the same bland, chipper tone. And it's like anecdote, name drop, chapter summary at the end. Well, guess what, Blake? Rip out the chapter summaries at the end, staple them together. You got 20 pages of great content.
Yep.
And in a lot of cases, on top of that, they're not very good or insightful. So like, I'm horrible that way and apologize, but I'll give a shout out to 2 books. One, I read early in my career. It was called Mastering the VC Game by a guy named Jeff Blusgang. He's a VC up in Boston. It was well written, good signal to noise ratio, right? It wasn't like packed to, padded to make it out to 200 pages. So the publisher would publish it. He actually has a new book came up right now about, how AI startups are kind of different, like, and how they grow differently. I haven't read it yet, but, I would probably take a flyer on that too. And for people who are kind of looking for something a little different, more general, there was a book called, I believe it's called Who, about hiring. So the author is Jeffrey Smart. That's Jeffrey with a G. Last name really is Smart. It's the smart method for hiring. I've never had to hire at the level of like a Fortune 100 CEO. So it was interesting to see about how you can make a hiring organization work. So a lot of good stuff there. It is a little hard to read, right? It is that same kind of like anecdote, name drop, chapter summary. So, get coffee. Don't try to read it at night at the end of the week.
Yep.
But there is actually some pretty solid content there if that's something you want to work on.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't heard of either one of those, so I'm gonna add them to my list.
If you heard of the goal, you're already like solid.
Well, yeah, it's anytime I'm on one of these and I get recommendations that I haven't heard or read, I usually order it pretty quickly and add it to the list. So
awesome.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find out more about you? Where can people buy your book?
Shocking that you would ask that. No, thank you. So number one, buy the book on Amazon. It's cool. Everything's on Amazon, right? So it's the Entrepreneur's Odyssey. And just because I love puns, the subtitle is like a novel guide to startup success. I don't think there are any other books with that name out there, so you should be okay. If you're vaguely interested in learning more about me, in addition to the book, I have a personal website. It's Andrew, the letter B as in boy. It's my middle initial, Ackerman. So Andrew B. Ackerman .com. And that's a great way to get a little more background on me.
Perfect. That's great. Well, thanks so much for being here. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again and just seeing how you're growing and just continuing to dive and really awesome. Diversify even more. You've got to.
And come on up to New York with the book. I'm happy to sign it for you.
Oh, that would be incredible. I got to wait till it's warm, but then I will.
True that.
Thanks again. Until next time.